Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 134. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on the ABC Australia, which you can see on Friday at 8 p.m. on ABC News Channel and Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. on ABC TV and on iView, and on Facebook at ABC Planet America and on YouTube at the ABC In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening, you can also see this podcast on Facebook and YouTube, where you'll see blurbs underneath with lots of extra information. And that's what you'll also see Dr. Pepper himself, Dr. David Smith. Hi, Dave. Tell us what we need to know.
I am an associate professor at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. However, I don't speak for either of those institutions. I speak for myself and I speak to the Peppers. And this is who I'm speaking for and to. So nobody else is responsible for me.
And you speak so well, Dr. Dave. We're also joined by a special guest today. I didn't expect a special guest. I know you didn't, Dave, but we're joined by one, and that is a buzz. Apparently from the power supply. There's a small buzz. Think of that as the natural buzz you get from every time you listen to PEP. That's what you're hearing. So just ignore that. Maybe just to pretend we're at an airport or something. Dr. Dave, tell us what you're grateful for.
The young Pepper who works in this very building who just explained to me how the toilet door works.
Could you not work out how to open the toilet door?
New toilet doors, I must admit, I had not seen the button.
Yeah, there's like a big green button next to it, isn't there?
Yeah, but that wasn't visible from the angle from which I approached it. Anyway, yes, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I'm grateful too, because I really wouldn't want to be seen next to you if you hadn't found that that toilet. I'm grateful for Nathan Fielder. Do you know Nathan Fielder?
No.
He's a comedian. A TV comedy maker. He's made some great, ambitious, clever TV. I don't know if the Peppers have heard of Nathan For You. Have you heard of Nathan For You?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's Nathan Fielder.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. He's the everyone else is just out of shot laughing with me guy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think he is.
But maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
It could well be. I imagine everyone just outshot is laughing with him because he's very funny.
Yes.
For a short time there, in my view, Nathan For You was the funniest show on TV, in my view, for a few years there. I have nothing but respect for the man's work ethic. You do not make TV that good by settling for the first stunt, because he often does stunt-based stuff. Nathan For You was stunt-based stuff. And having made stunt-based TV, I can tell you he must have gone through many, many stunts to get the examples he ended up putting to air, because they were incredible.
Yeah,
That's the one?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
That's like one of the most famous things on the late Twitter.
Oh, no, I don't. I missed that. Okay. Well, there we go. I should pay attention.
We'll put that up.
We'll have to. Then he made that tweet. Then he also he made the rehearsal, which was last year or the year before, which I must admit I didn't like a huge amount, but it was weird in a way that only happens when something is really, really groundbreaking.
Yes.
Like that makes it weird.
Yep.
And then you go, okay, I either like the broken ground, or I want someone just to pull out the shovel and just put that ground back. In that case, I wanted the ground to be returned, but I really respected that he went for it.
Okay.
And it was really good. And look, because you're potentially killing your own career when you do something like that. Yeah. But, he did it anyway because he's like that. I've heard The Curse is good. That's his new show. I haven't watched it yet because I'm making Planet America. But during my holidays, I'll definitely download that. But the reason I'm grateful for him is I want to focus on one aspect of his, which is his talk show appearances.
Okay.
Like when he shows up on Tonight Show, basically he doesn't waste an opportunity to do a bit. All right, he doesn't come on, even though he's booked to promote a show.
Yes.
He never promotes a show.
Right.
He just turns up and does some comedy bit.
Okay.
Which is some sort of, postmodern kind of weird bit, which just confuses all the audience.
Yes.
Definitely confuses the commenters on YouTube. They always hate him when he turns up on a talk show. But I love it. And are
you going to show us something?
I can show you. Well, They go for a little while. They go for a little. In fact, I'm not going to show it to you. I'm going to put the links in the blurb. Okay. You can watch for yourself. The reason why I'm not going to show it to you because the first one, the classic one, went for 10 minutes.
Right.
And I don't want to play 10 minutes.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And that was when he was back on Conan. He went for Nathan For You on Conan, and he brought on Susan Sarandon as a backup guest. That was his bit. His bit was, I don't want to be boring, so I've got a backup guest here. And it was Susan Sarandon. She just sat there the whole time while he told the most boring story on earth about his cats, daring Conan to go to her as the backup guest. And every time Conan tried to go to her, he'd then act offended. So it was just a weird routine, which had nothing to do with Nathan For You, but it was very funny. And the link is in the blurb. And just this week, he outdid himself on Jimmy Kimmel.
Yes.
Where he was promoting The Curse. He turned up with Emma Stone, big movie star. Mm-hmm. And I can't even describe. I'll put up a photo of what he looked like so you can see for yourself there. He looked weird. Essentially, he was acting like his normal personality is him acting like a loser.
Right.
And this was the real him, who was this super pretentious actor.
Yes.
And he was acting like he was this super pretentious actor who normally is pretending to be Nathan Fielder, if you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah.
And the entire 16-minute interview, it just went on and on and on, was just him hijacking it because he was acting offended by a New York Times review of his acting. And he was acting like he was the world's greatest actor who was quite offended by that. And every time Emma Stone started talking, he just hijacked it to make it about his acting again. And it infuriated the commenters on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I imagine the audience were just completely confused. But it was just brilliant. And it's just classic commitment to the bit from Nathan Fielder. You don't get anywhere else. So please go to the blurb, watch both of them. And you'll probably hate me for it because so many people hate him, but I love him so much.
This is when people talk about someone's being a comedian's comedian, right? They're talking about someone like him then.
Yes, they are.
Because you are a comedian and you find him funny.
Yeah.
But is it when people talk about comedians, often they're people that a lot of people don't find very funny.
Yeah, you're probably right. And I wouldn't call myself a comedian, but I'll take it for the purpose of your analogy.
Yes.
But please go to the blurb and work out if you are a comedian, if you like him. Okay, so that's what I'm grateful for.
Yes.
I got some correspondences.
Yes.
First of all, shoes. Well, there's a lot of controversy about how weird.
A lot of controversy, yes, yeah. 3,000
shoes would be for a modern nutcase. We're talking about Melda Marcos with their 3,000 shoes.
Yep.
A lot of buying into this one, a lot of talk.
Yeah.
First of all, people were suggesting 3,000 wasn't quite right. According to the ABC, it was 2,700.
Oh.
Yeah, so, but.
Okay, yeah. 9/10 of 3,000.
Yeah, but.
Yes.
Let's get, but there's much better discussion than that.
Okay.
Julian, Tom, Neil, I've probably missed a few.
Yeah.
All noted the Guinness Book of Records has stated that Jordan Michael Geller founded and operated the Shoeseum, which is the world's first sneaker museum.
Right, yeah.
Which suggests to me that there's a second sneaker museum out there.
Of course. Yeah.
But anyway.
Yes.
In 2012, he was certified having the largest sneaker collection in the world at 2,388 pairs, but that's just sneakers.
Yes.
There are many other kinds of shoes.
Yes.
Kevin has told us that the world's largest collection of shoes was from Darlene Flynn of the USA.
Right.
16,400 pairs of shoes.
That's more like it.
Dave's feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah.
Darlene also had the world's largest collection of shoe-related items. 15,665 in just 12 years.
So who is Darlene Flynn? Because, I mean, clearly she's not a dictator.
No, she's not. Well, I guess she's
just a shoe enthusiast.
I guess she's the person who backs up what you're saying.
Yeah,
if you had some weirdo on social media, what is extreme?
Thanks, Darlene.
Yeah, that's extreme. I do wonder what a shoe-related item is defined as. What are we talking about there?
Shoehorn?
Shoehorns, maybe? Party feet, maybe? I don't know. But there aren't many shoe-related items out there. Just imagine if she has 15,000 shoehorns. Are there 15,000 shoehorns in the world? I don't know.
Well.
Go to Darlene's place and find out. But anyway, that's backing you up, Dave.
Yes.
But Kiyu is not impressed. It's a bit mixed. She says, I'll read out her comment. I'm a lady pepper and I have watched enough Sex in the City to know about luxury shoes, even if mine all come from an op shop. Designer shoes can start at $500 all the way up to a couple of million each. If you take a Manolo Blahnik that starts at $5,000 each as an easy luxury reference price point. $3,000 by $5,000, that's $15 million. Plus or minus a few million. That's nowhere near breaking the billionaire bank. I agree, by today's social media standards, 3,000 shoes is not much. Celine Dion is claimed to have a wardrobe for 10,000 shoes in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So there we go.
And she definitely is a dictator.
But then Q backtracks a little. She says, in the context of 60s to 80s Philippines, that's outrageous.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Never forget, Imelda would have had handbags and the wardrobe and the jewelry and the art to match all those shoes.
Yes, yeah.
And the extravagant parties to wear them to. And everyone knows you can't repeat outfits. She finally makes the point. The 3,000 shoe figure is just the number she left behind at the palace when she hastily fled.
Oh, yes.
So she probably had more with her in collections in other parts of the world as well.
Kleptocratic stuff.
So, yeah. So, look, in conclusion, I'm going to concede. I think 3,000 isn't as bad as I thought it was because of Darlene. Only because of Darlene.
Thanks, Darlene.
But possibly Marcos might have had more than 3,000, and so maybe Marcos still holds the record.
With the sneaker figure, I am aware that over the last 10 years, the whole sneaker trade has been transformed somewhat because the online resale market being what it is, and so many sneaker companies issue these limited release sneakers like 500 pairs. Well, I've heard that there's something like a billion pairs of Yeezys out there that Adidas is wondering whether to release them or not, given the whole anti-Semitism thing. But apparently there are people who essentially treat sneakers like commodities now. So they're not necessarily collecting them, but they are buying large numbers of them for resale purposes because they go up and down like stocks.
So they're kind of like a less lame NFT.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, much less lame.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, because it actually is something.
Yeah.
Also, like I think a lot of sneakers do actually go up in value, which NFTs did for a couple of weeks. But I think they've only been going in one direction since then.
Fair enough.
Yes.
I should also issue an important correction. As the Peppers know, when I mislead you guys, albeit unintentionally.
Yes.
I do think it's my obligation to correct the record, and I've got a doozy for you today.
What is that?
I feel a little bit ashamed. When we talked about shoes last time, I said I only had one pair of shoes.
Oh!
That's not true, because as soon as I walked out of the studio, I thought, oh, shit, I've got running shoes. And I've got footy boots as well.
Wow.
And not just that, I also have access to the ABC wardrobe, so if I go to a wedding, I don't have to wear sneakers. I can get dress shoes from the ABC.
Yeah.
So really, I have 3.5 pairs of shoes. If you count the ABCs, a half. So I feel ashamed.
I hope you don't all feel too betrayed.
I'm kind of a mini
Peppers.
Marcos in my own way.
Yeah. But if you've got access to 3.5 pairs of shoes, why have I never seen you actually wearing shoes?
Well, because 2 of them are for exercise.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the other half is in the ABC wardrobe. So I effectively only have one, which is why I said one. I wasn't trying to be sneaky.
Yeah.
I just forgot the exercise shoes.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway. Some more correspondence. We've got a lot of quick ones here.
Yep.
Ben has requested some updates, and he's told us what updates he wants, and they're good updates.
Yeah, okay.
One, a lawyer for a defendant in the Georgia trial admitted to the judge that they leaked the video testimony of Jenna Ellis, he says. That is true. Fani Willis was applying for a protective order to stop leaks, like those videos occurring, which we talked about a few weeks back with Bill. Her office said the leaks were clearly intended to intimidate witnesses in this case, subjecting them to harassment and threats prior to trial. And then one of the lawyers popped up and said, actually, they weren't. It was me who leaked them. I wasn't trying to intimidate anybody. That was the lawyer for Misty Hampton, the one whose name you like.
Yep.
He said he wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. He said, I'm not trying to intimidate people. I just thought the videos helped my client, and I thought the public had the right to know. Because at that point in time, there was no gag order, so he could leak them. It wasn't illegal.
Okay.
Misty Hampton, for those who don't remember, was the Coffee County elections director who let people into the elections office so they could copy software and data from the Coffee County election equipment. So anyway, so that's the first update.
Okay.
So that's what happened then. There was no revenge. It was just a lawyer. And the second update that he asked for was about the law clerk in the New York civil fraud trial Alison Greenfield, he said, didn't actually infringe ethics rules by donating more than $500 to the Democrats because she's running to be a judge and apparently has a formal legal opinion that makes this okay.
Okay.
And once again, that is true.
Right.
He's good, Ben. He's good to the facts.
He is good, Ben.
I did tell you about Alison Greenfield donating in 2022. She donated about 6 times more than the $500 allowed for someone in her job towards paid political activities.
Yep.
We said there was a pretty minor breach if it was true.
Yes.
But like Ben said, there is an exception. When you're running for a seat on the bench, which Greenfield was in 2022, you're allowed to exceed the cap to purchase tickets to political events as long as you don't buy more than 2 tickets per event and the cost per ticket's no more than $250.
Yep.
And you're kind of expected to attend those events if you're running for a seat. That's how you get an endorsement from the party.
Okay.
And it's better to pay for them than give them free. That's
Absolutely,
for sure.
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, and now I don't know if her donations definitely largely went to all those events. Did they completely go to those events? Did 100% take care of the breach? I don't know. But I also note that she spent twice the legal limit this year. And I don't know if she's running for a seat this year. So, look, I'm not saying that she's home free, but it was a pretty mild breach to begin with. Now it's even milder, if it exists at all. So there we go. It's not going to stop them complaining about it, though. No. Which was the point I made. Anyway, thanks, Ben. Good updating. A few more quick updates. Primary update. Marquette put out national favourability numbers, which are interesting. DeSantis is the worst of all the contenders at the moment. With minus 21 net favourability, 34-55.
Something about him really pisses people off.
Biden was next. So DeSantis has a lower net favourability than Biden. Biden was next at minus 19. That's 40-59.
Yep.
Trump was next at minus 15. That's 42-57. There's only one person in positive territory, Nikki Haley.
Yes.
Plus 7.
Wow.
But that's 38-31. 31% of people don't know who she is.
Yes.
So we'll see where that goes. So really, she's just as popular as the rest of them.
Yes.
But she just has a much lower unfavourable because she's unknown.
Yes.
But anyway, I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
So I thought I'd raise that. No labels update with no Joe Manchin. We talked about whether he'll be the no labels candidate. According to Nancy Jacobson, the no labels chief executive, she told potential donors that the no labels candidate will be a Republican.
Okay.
Which would rule out Joe Manchin. He could be the VP candidate though. But anyway, but as an aside as well, he did spend the entire last week bagging out Trump, which I found interesting because I thought, on one hand, he's saying he's determined to not get Trump re-elected because that's why he was bagging him out. Yeah. But on the other hand, doesn't it guarantee if he does run that will help Trump get re-elected because the anti-Trump talk will help draw votes from Democrats?
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there. I just thought I'd find that a bit weird.
I noticed some polls are actually starting to mention Manchin's name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, I mean, people don't really know who to poll and who not to poll at the moment.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so many. It's a cast of thousands at the moment.
Yeah.
Abortion update. I'm just flying through these quickly.
Yes,
It's some talk of an abortion amendment in Florida in 2024. We've spoken about that.
Yep.
They've got a 6-week abortion ban at the moment that potentially jails the mother. Newsom's already running ads in Florida about that for some reason. That's just a Newsom thing to do. But there was a PRRI poll from February that found 64% of Floridians believe abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Remember the threshold to pass an amendment in Florida is 60%. Yes. It used to be 50%. They pushed up to 60% to try and eliminate people from getting stuff up. So what do you think they did? State Republicans are trying to introduce a motion to increase the threshold to 66.7%. Very Ohio. We're doing this again. So we'll see how that goes, if it goes exactly like Ohio, because they'll have to pass a motion to get that happening, of course.
Florida, remember, I think in 2016, in the year they elected Trump, they also, by amendments, legalized marijuana and put the minimum wage up to $15 an hour.
Yeah.
So there is actually an appetite for progressive policy amendments in Florida, even when they're voting for Republicans.
There you go.
So that would, if it stays at 60%, it would have a very good chance of passing.
Seems that way.
Yes.
And the final update is a budget update. The House Republicans apparently are trying to wrap up their impeachment inquiry and vote for the impeachment of Joe Biden by the end of January. Which, if you recall last week, clashes with the budget shutdown deadline.
Yes.
Remember last week we were saying they're going to have their work cut out for them to just do what they need to do in the 22 congressional days. Throw in an impeachment circus in the middle of that. Makes it a bit harder. And if they create a shutdown while wasting time on impeachment theatre,
that
will not be popular.
Yes.
I boldly predict.
Yes.
So,
but it's not like they've actually got anything to wrap up, is it?
No, it's not going to take long, but it'll take a few days.
Yeah.
And they only have 22.
Here's this unverified allegation from months ago, which has never been added to. Here's a bit of witness testimony, which actually destroyed our entire case.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not very much to wrap up.
They probably won't mention that last bit.
They probably won't mention that last bit, but I'm sure
that saves
Democrats
time.
Will. Yes.
Okay. So anyway, that was a very lengthy update, but I got through a lot there. To start the next section, I have a correspondence question for you, Dr. Dave.
Yes.
Which will set you up for the next bit.
Okay.
It's from Vella. Question for Dr. Dave. A few years ago, you discussed whether Donald Trump met the criteria to be described as a fascist, concluding that he did not. Is that still your view?
Okay, thank you very much for this. And the short answer is yes, that is still my view, but I do think that the question has got harder to answer in the intervening years. There are a lot of people who do make the case that Trump is a fascist or is a kind of fascist, which includes some very serious scholars of fascism like Robert Paxton. So this is something that, people with a lot of knowledge really disagree about. I'm still going to come down on the side of no. I certainly think he's a right-wing authoritarian, but there are forms of right-wing authoritarianism that are not fascism, even if they're pretty close to fascism, such as Franco in Spain or Pinochet in Chile. And lest it seem like I'm just splitting hairs, I'll go into the explanation of what I mean. First of all, I think that it's worth distinguishing between two things. One is fascist regime and the other is fascist movement. I don't think that there's any chance of seeing a fascist regime under Trump in the United States. A fascist regime involves what Robert Griffin, who's Roger Griffin, one of the most prominent historians of fascism, talks about the regimentation of everything in life. Okay, fascism as it was practiced in Nazi Germany and in fascist Italy, which are the two sort of most widely accepted examples of fascism. The whole idea was that everything in life was brought under the apparatus of fascist leadership. Everything else was completely subservient to it. And in this very good book by Tilman, Allert, The Hitler Salute, The Meaning of a Gesture, he talks about the most sort of banal version of this was the fact that after 1933, it became compulsory for Germans to greet each other with a Hitler salute. And he said that all of the moral obscenities of Nazism were basically foreshadowed by how easily this was accepted by Germans. The fact that the most basic interaction that structured relationships between people, a greeting, the fact that that took on the form of Heil Hitler, he says that really sort of foreshadowed the moral degeneration. And I'll just read a passage.
That was a law.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea.
So he says, Germans' electoral approval of the National Socialist regime in 1933 and the collective abandonment of moral principles it expressed required an upheaval in the micro-social processes of everyday life, presaging on a small scale the larger horrors of National Socialism. The story of Nazi Germany begins with indifference, not the frenzies of anti-Semitism, mass deportations, organised genocide. My thesis is that the collapse of morals that can permit such deprivations comes about neither suddenly nor by accident. Instead, it results from a loss of personal sovereignty and the ability to shape one's own existence. A fractured relationship to oneself precedes the underestimation of changes in social relations. Once those changes have taken place, charisma, Hitler's in this place, can let loose its monstrous power and, as Max Weber might have said, turns rules, traditions and ideas of what is holy on their heads. In Germany, this process took place imperceptibly, but in plain sight. People have a tendency to regard action, their own as well as that of others, only in terms of its immediate consequences and attribute to their experiences, including the experience of greeting and being greeted, to causes they do not control. Being blind in this way to one's own agency in social interactions leads to confusion about the basic criteria on which human relations rest, even before the indifference and perversion of morals that are its objective can set in without anyone having to form or being able to articulate any corresponding conviction. Now, sorry, that was a very long passage to read out.
That's good. You gave me my new ringtone.
I just want to make the point, though, that we're not seeing in the United States at the moment that kind of mass indifference. And we wouldn't see that kind of mass indifference if Trump became president again. The conditions for totalitarianism are not there in the United States. And that's leaving aside the fact that, you know, Trump and his people, his allies especially, their slogan is destroy the administrative state. Fascism is not about destroying the administrative state, at least not within their country. It's a state capacity is actually very important for fascism because everything needs to be brought under fascist leadership, the economy, society, everything. Those other cases I mentioned, Franco's Spain, Pinochet's Chile, which I say are not examples of fascism, one of the reasons why they're not is because there wasn't that level of total social control. There were still other institutions such as the Catholic Church and the military in both countries, which still remained very, very powerful. The state wasn't the only, kind of locus of power. Okay, so that is why I don't think that we can really talk about Trump's America as any kind of fascist regime. There are too many other centers of power standing in the way. And I think that, you know, however authoritarian power is used in the United States, it's actually used for protecting existing power structures. Fascism is actually largely about the destruction of all existing structures and the replacement with something new.
Well, isn't that the destruction of the administrative state you just referred to? They want to replace it with their own administrative state.
It's the destruction of the state. Yeah. But that's to leave existing structures of social power in place. That's to leave oligarchical capitalism in place. That's to leave, traditional conservative social structures in place. But you have to distinguish between a fascist regime and a fascist movement, right? There's a much more plausible case that Trumpism is a fascist movement of some kind. And I certainly wouldn't deny that Trump has supporters who are fascists, including some of the people who were involved in January 6th. Now, one of the most famous and widely accepted definitions of fascism comes from Roger Griffin, who I've already mentioned. I'll just say from the outset, Roger Griffin was asked by Dylan Matthews from Vox back in 2021 whether he thought that Trump was a fascist, and he said, no, Trump just does not have the ideology. He actually put it in far more insulting terms than that. But one of Griffin's arguments is that fascist thought actually has to be taken very seriously, and you just don't have a system of thought there with Trump. However, Griffin also did say that the real sort of minimal definition of fascism actually has to come in the kind of mythology of it rather than the ideology of it. So his argument is that fascism revolves around what he called palingenesis, which means rebirth. It's a philosophy of national rebirth, that the country has become so decadent that it's on the point of collapse and that it needs complete renewal. So fascism is about the complete renewal of the country, this rebirth, which in the case of Italy, Mussolini was sort of invoking the Roman Empire. This was basically the rebirth of the Roman Empire.
Making the country great again.
Well, this is the thing. And so in Germany, Hitler was invoking the First Reich, which was the Holy Roman Empire, and the Second Reich, which was Bismarck's regime from 1879 to 1918. And you can certainly look at Make America Great Again and think, yeah, that sounds pretty fascist, especially when you throw in the increasingly violent and dehumanizing rhetoric that Trump and his allies are using about wanting to root out every Marxist and leftist who live like vermin within the confines of our country. Stephen Chung saying, well, these complaints are coming from liberals whose miserable existences will be crushed. The idea of bringing about national rebirth through redemptive violence, yes, that's pretty fascist. So this is why I sympathise with people who are increasingly making an argument that there's a fascist movement going on here. However, I think there are still some pretty key ways in which Trump is not fascist. And one of those ways is fascism is futuristic. Okay, fascism is actually about creating something completely new. It does look back to the past. In many cases, looks back to a very distant and mythical past. Okay, so even though Hitler was invoking a regime that had only ended a few years prior, he was also going right back into German paganism and into the Roman and Greek empires, as well as sort of more recent German history. Whereas Mussolini was going way, way back. When Trump's talking about Make America Great Again, I think what he's usually talking about is actually an America that his supporters remember, or at least think that they can remember, that is usually located in either the 80s or the 50s. And the thing about the Italian and German versions of fascism was they wanted to sweep away liberal democracy and the constitutional order completely, and replace it with another form of government, another form of state entirely. With Trump, the era that he's harking back to, or the eras that he's harking back to, it's not another system of government. It's a form of liberal democracy where Republicans were winning elections all the time. And, where the country was a lot more recognisable to people like him. So, in other words, I think that the nostalgia that's involved is it's too recent, it's too similar, it's not about completely remaking the country. To put it in the simplest terms possible, Trump and his supporters don't have the energy or the ambition to imagine some completely new America that they want to create, which would involve this immense sacrifice and huge new effort to completely regiment the United States along completely different lines, right? They are just remembering, in many cases falsely, a recent past where they were happier and, where they were, where they felt that they were in charge. And this brings us to a really critical point about the fact that not all forms of the right, not even all forms of the far right, of right-wing authoritarianism are actually fascist. And one of the main arguments I would make against using the fascism label is that it tends to invoke something foreign. It invokes something out of European experience. And when people are calling Trump a fascist, one of the things that they're trying to do is to actually distance him from American traditions. It's a way of saying this is un-American. The United States is a liberal democracy. This is something foreign and very frightening to us. Now, the reality is there are plenty of right-wing American authoritarian traditions that Trump is drawing on that are actually a lot worse than anything that he has done so far. When you consider the fact that from 1890 into the 1960s in the United States, about 13 states were effectively one-party authoritarian regimes where social exclusion of African Americans from, various parts of physical space, the electoral process, various parts of the economy was enforced by both state-backed and non-state-backed violence up to the point of public murder. You can see that there are authoritarian traditions that are pretty, if not uniquely American, that are distinctively American. You don't need to go to fascism to draw on it. And one of the differences between those American versions and the European versions was that you didn't have this, this party regimentation of everything. This was it was largely to do with local elites and their followers just taking matters into their own hands in order to enforce their local control. There are other American authoritarian traditions as well. There is McCarthyism, okay, the idea of there is an enemy within the United States that needs to be rooted out, and especially needs to be rooted out of the government by violent means if possible. That is, that's very close to the kind of language that Trump is using now.
And importantly, I just jump in there because you might be about to say this, but if you weren't, McCarthy's advisor was Roy Cohen.
Yes, absolutely.
Who was the person who taught Trump everything he knows.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And in his book, The Intellectuals and McCarthy, which I think is actually already on the reading list, Michael Paul Rogin made this really important point, which is he said that people, especially a lot of historians around the time of McCarthy, they depicted him as an aberration in American politics, being as this demagogue who was drawing on older demagogic traditions, but was really at odds with what American democracy was all about, which was pluralism. And Rogin makes the point that, in fact, American politics has always been really intensely moralized in ways that McCarthy just brought to the surface. There actually wasn't anything particularly unusual about him. And I think that people run the risk of making the same mistake about Trump. The idea of seeing him as, something completely aberrant when you actually look at him and all of these traditions that he's drawing on. Another one is big city authoritarian mayors, people like Frank Rizzo in Philadelphia, people like Ned Daly in Chicago, people like Giuliani in New York. He also would not be the first president to, really push at norms. And even some presidents who are pretty widely admired, like Lincoln and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, widely admired by people who do not like Trump at all, were actually considered major norm breakers in their time. So I think for that reason, because I don't like the kind of distancing that's involved in describing something as fascist, given how many other right-wing authoritarian traditions in the United States that Trump actually hews pretty closely to, I don't think that we need to go to the fascist label, although I'm increasingly sympathetic to people who are pointing out that sort of violent rebirth rhetoric, which is something that all fascism has in common. But there are a lot of other things that also have that in common. So I would still say that I don't think that Trump is a fascist.
I hope that answers your question, Vella. No, that was a brilliant answer. And I thought that was really good stuff. I was trying to not get in the way because I thought it was really, really good. And I really love that you brought your own prop as well. That was fantastic. More props, Dave. I would only ask you one thing. I would like you to, even though you kind of answered most of the fascist thing, I would like you between the two of us, to take people through the reason why that question came up, the things that we that have been talked about in the last few weeks, like the policies, the supposed policies of 2025, and the rhetoric that you've touched on. Before we do that, I would actually I'll flag one thing. We'll come to a little later on, which is everything you just said about Trump. I think I agree with. I think that really makes sense. But like you also acknowledged, it doesn't necessarily reflect all his supporters.
Yes, absolutely.
And possibly the key supporter of his second term might be his number one advisor, Stephen Miller.
Oh, Stephen Miller is very close to being a fascist.
This is what I'm thinking.
Very, very close.
And we'll come back to Stephen Miller when we talk about the rhetoric.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about the last few weeks?
Yes. So there's been a lot of talk over the last few weeks about Trump's authoritarian plans for his second term, because he's starting to use this kind of rhetoric very openly, although he actually has been doing this for a while. He's been talking a lot about retribution.
Yep.
There's also been, I think it was Jonathan Swan reported for Axios last year on the plan to completely remake the bureaucracy. Okay, but once again, these plans are becoming a lot more publicized in recent weeks. So, okay, let's talk about this. Certainly, a lot of Trump's allies and Trump himself believe that his first term was undermined by officials who were insufficiently loyal.
Yes.
And every time there's a new memoir, every time there is, there's another disgruntled former lieutenant saying that Trump is not fit to hold high office anymore, the John Kellys and the Mark Espers, and the Millies and the Boltons and the Barrs, but this belief grows stronger that Trump was basically stabbed in the back by people who were around him. But it goes beyond that. They believe that all the way through the whole system, especially at the mid-levels, there were all of these pockets of resistance to Trump. And that's why he wasn't able to put his agenda in place. I'll say from the outset that I think this is a bit of a misreading of what happened. I would say the strongest constraints on Trump, it was quite clearly federalism. We actually really saw how incoherent the whole American system could be and how much federalism could be a site of resistance.
And the Supreme Court.
Which basically states, cities, they could just do their own thing with a lot of stuff. And once again, it's not like that's a new thing in the United States. Federalism was the main site of resistance to the civil rights movement. I mean, it was, so none of that should be a surprise. I don't think it was because of, disloyal bureaucrats at either the mid or the high level. But anyway, that's their reigning theory. And so as you have had these people who have moved out of Trump's circle, of course, you've got people who have now tried to move into his circle, among them one of our favourites on the podcast, J.D. Vance. So J.D. Vance was asked, by a Vanity Fair interviewer last year in an article about the new right and how Peter Thiel is funding it, what should Trump do in his second term? And he said, fire every mid-level bureaucrat in the country and replace them with our people. Now, there's already an administrative plan in place for doing this, which they actually tried to execute towards the end of Trump's first presidency, which is called Schedule F. Schedule F would be a new category created for civil service employees. I think about 50,000 of them would be put on this schedule where they no longer have the employment protections of the civil service.
Yes.
So whereas usually a president makes about 4,000 political appointments, not all of them do, but can make about 4,000 political appointments. This would be more like 50,000 political appointments. That's still not like the majority of the federal civil service, but so that's enough to get people, to really completely reshape the civil service. So that is the plan. Now, there are several organisations now that are actually, they say they're drawing up lists of vetted employees who will not stand in the way of Trump, who will actively embrace Trump's agenda, who are not only staunchly opposed to illegal immigration, but to legal immigration as well. It goes without saying that not accepting the 2020 election result would be an absolute litmus test of working in the Trumpified civil service. And the people who are putting these lists together, they acknowledge that these are not going to be experienced people.
No.
One of them said in the Jonathan Swan article, I can't remember who it was, but he said, but look at Reagan. Reagan hired young, he hired ideological, and he hired underqualified. There's some truth to that, right? Reagan gave Dinesh D'Souza his start. Okay, that's a lot of people have described this as a pretty scary plan to basically remake completely remake the civil service. It would basically mean the end of an impartial civil service. Now, couple of notes of caution about this. First of all, if there's one thing that we have learned from the entirety of the Trump experience, it's that there's all kinds of scammy individuals and organizations who gravitate to him promising things like this.
Yes.
Right? The Brad Pascalis of the world, the Cambridge Analyticas of the world, promising that they can deliver the world to Trump. So, okay, maybe they actually do have lists of tens of thousands of vetted MAGA civil service applicants that they can use to completely staff a Trump civil service. I am skeptical of that, regardless of what they're promising. But okay, say that they do. If the theory is Trump can really get stuff done if he's got this completely pliant civil service, we have to look at one of the other reasons why he failed to get a lot of stuff done, which was because he had so many completely inexperienced people working for him.
Yeah.
Because he had so many acting secretaries who didn't have any real power and were basically, they knew that their position was completely at Trump's whim. The fact is that the kind of, resistance that anyone faces in government when they want to do new things, that's not just because they have insufficiently loyal staff. That's because there are structures in place that actually take a very long time and a lot of effort to dismantle, that are not just to do with replacing personnel. That's budgetary structures, it's administrative structures, and it's legal structures as well. And if you don't have the experience around those things, you actually can't dismantle them. And that actually should have been something that Trump learned last time around. Okay, but bureaucrats are only one group that he would need to completely, remake if he wanted to carry out this authoritarian second-term agenda, which we have learnt would include things like applying ideological tests to immigrants who want to come into the United States. He's possibly even hinting at religious tests. Okay, so they're talking also about the need for lawyers who are going to do Trump's bidding. And in the New York Times article from November the 1st, one of Trump's people, it might have been Russ Vought, was talking about the need for lawyers who are prepared to risk the personal and professional kind of consequences of advancing legal theories that more respectable lawyers would not, that more establishment lawyers would not, who are actually so aligned with MAGA that they're prepared potentially to, recommend breaking the law. Okay, so let's take a couple of things into account about this. One is Trump has only got 4 years in office. Like, even he is saying he's not going to seek a third term. I'll believe that when I see it.
Yeah, we'll see.
At the moment, he's saying that he wouldn't seek a third term. The other thing is he's 77 years old. Like, he's not going to be around forever. So if you're a young lawyer, the proposition that you're facing is, with your whole career in front of you, do you start out as one of Trump's lawless lawyers? What consequences is that going to have for the rest of your career? There are people who are going to do it. They talk about Ken Paxton's office in Texas is a pretty fruitful breeding ground for this type of lawyer, but nonetheless, it's going to be a relatively limited pool. Okay, so that's but let's say that he can get these lawyers who are prepared to advance these wacko legal theories, who are prepared to really push the envelope. What then is the obstacle that Trump runs into? It's judges he has already appointed. Okay, so in 2016, Trump famously promised that he would appoint judges from lists that were supplied to him by the Federalist Society and by the Heritage Foundation. And he did. He appointed so many Federalist Society judges, as well as having Federalist Society lawyers like Donald McGahn and Pat Cipollone on his legal staff. Now, Federalist Society lawyers, they are committed to a certain conservative vision of society. Most of them are not actually committed to Trumpism. Trumpism is actually a little bit anathema to what they believe in. It was an alliance of convenience for them. When Leonard Leo, who's the president of the founder of the Federalist Society, was questioned about the fact that he's had an obvious and massive falling out with Trump, he just responded, "Look, I'm really just happy that in his first term, Trump completely remade the Supreme Court. In other words, fuck you, I got what I wanted out of this." And that's the general Federalist Society attitude. That's why there are now prominent members of the Federalist Society who are suggesting that Trump shouldn't be allowed to run again. And as for the literally hundreds of judges that Trump appointed to lifetime positions, do they need personal loyalty to Trump anymore? No. Some of them might have personal loyalty to Trump, but it's not something that they need. Now, this is something that has clearly been a disappointment to Trump already. The one case the one 2020 election case that actually got all the way to the Supreme Court, which was the ridiculous Texas versus Pennsylvania amicus brief, all three of Trump's appointees said, no, we're not even going to look at this. It was Thomas and Alito who said that they might possibly entertain it, but even they weren't that enthusiastic about it. Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh both rejected at least one version of the state legislature supremacy theory earlier on this year, which would have been the centerpiece of future electoral challenges, right? These judges do not owe Trump anything. And part of the problem that Trump is going to face as he's pushing the legal envelope is, yes, they're going to acquiesce to a lot of things that he wants to do, but only things that they actually believe in. So, yes, they will certainly probably acquiesce to things that will make it easier for him to fire civil service staff. There's a case making its way to the Supreme Court at the moment. I think it's called Jacuzzi, which is about the Securities and Exchange Commission, about the use of administrative judges. There, where some guy who blatantly committed fraud and was nailed for it by the SEC is saying, no, this should have gone to a federal circuit judge instead. That case is going to have huge ramifications, and it looks like there's a good chance that the Supreme Court is going to come down on the side of this stock fraud, and that is going to potentially pave the way for all of this Schedule F stuff. So yes, they're going to enable a lot of stuff. What they're not going to enable is the kind of accumulation of personal power that Trump wants. So if 2020 is anything to go by, they're actually not going to enable these kinds of election shenanigans. They're certainly not going to entertain any prospect of third terms or delayed elections or terminating the Constitution or anything else that Trump has talked about. And this is the stuff that frustrates him the most. So in fact, all of those hundreds of lifetime appointments he's already made, they are going to be an obstacle to him. The third group, of course, that he's going to have to remake is Republican elected officials. This was the other group whose lack of cooperation stood between him and his authoritarian plans in the first term. Now, certainly Congress is going to be, Republicans in Congress are way more pliant now than they were back then. The other thing is that he has largely remade the machinery of the party. With Bannon's precinct strategy, the Trump people have taken over so many local versions of the party. There's little danger anymore of resistance on that front. However, we're back again to this same problem. You fill these ranks of previously politically experienced operators with people with no experience of politics and just with a lot of pro-Trump zeal. What do you get? You're getting state Republican parties going bankrupt and being unable to wage election campaigns. You're getting Democrats racking up victory after victory in places where they've got no business racking up victories because the ranks of local Republicans are increasingly filled with MAGA people who are far more concerned about policing the Republican Party than they are about winning an election campaign, which they have no idea of how to do. So yes, bringing the party completely under your control. Yes, you're stamping out resistance within the party, but you're also making the party a much weaker thing. And when push comes to shove, we found that Trump has actually not had a lot of success in ousting state-level Republican officials who opposed him, as we can see from Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger in Georgia. These people are actually popular locally, which comes back to the point that it's federalism, it's the states that are the main sites of resistance to Trump, not the federal civil service, not the federal Republican Party, which is what he could actually control. So yes, I think that his plans for his authoritarian plans for his second term are appalling. He is being egged on by people who, they do not believe in that there's such a thing as an impartial civil service or an impartial judiciary or impartial government institutions. They believe that all of these things are political weapons that have been in the hands of their cultural enemies. But all of Trump's efforts to remake those, even if they are successful, are not necessarily going to increase his power.
Okay. That's one element.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just say a couple of things and then let's introduce some of the other ones. But
Yes.
I am conscious of the fact that we got a lot of things to talk about. Okay, so first of all, I completely agree about I agree with most of what you said there. The competence thing I think is a massive issue.
Yes.
That what he is essentially, like, most decisions involving the bureaucracy have nothing to do with your loyalty to Trump.
Yeah.
But you do need to have competence in everything you do.
Yes.
And the whole place grinds to a halt if you have a whole bunch of new people who don't know what they're doing.
Yes.
Like, you don't get to the part where Trump gets to get them to do what he wants. If they're not making the trains run on time.
Yes, yeah.
Like they are. And so to just take out the top 6 layers of bureaucracy,
Yes.
you just create an incompetent government. I'll tell you what it reminds me of.
Yeah.
You referred to some of the institutions who are putting together these lists, which, by the way, I should say Trump's campaigns explicitly said had nothing to do with them.
Yes, yeah.
So we don't even know if there's anything to it.
Yeah, no, as I said, it's very typical of these kinds of organisations and individuals who hang around Trump promising him stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, one of them is the Heritage Foundation. They've got their own list going. And as soon as I hear the Heritage Foundation and I hear about them putting together lists where they're asking people questions like, name one person, past or present, who has most influenced the development of your political philosophy. Hint, it's Trump. And do the same with a book. Hint, it's Art of the Deal. Another query, name one living public policy figure whom you greatly admire and why. It's Trump, because he made America great again. Okay, so when I hear those kinds of questions, and I don't know about you, the very first thing I'm thinking about is Iraq. The Coalition Provisional Authority back in 2002.
Yes.
A lot of our peppers, our beautiful peppers, are too young probably to remember this.
Yes.
But we've been here before.
Yeah.
The Heritage Foundation came up with a similar list to vet people, to basically get a whole bunch of hacks to run Iraq when they took over Iraq. In 2003 that was. And there was a whole bunch of 25-year-olds who had no experience, straight out of college, who went over, and it was a disaster. They had no idea what they were doing. They were completely incompetent. And it's just that all over again. So I think that if that's anything to go by, people shouldn't be worried about that.
No.
You're just so right about when you're talking about as well, that they're going to run into the courts with these incompetent people. Because what happened in the first term was he didn't have time to do anything because he spent the first 3 years in court. Like immigration, for instance, he just got so much less done than he wanted to because he just kept on getting stuff overthrown in court. That's why the wall hasn't been built, amongst other things. So it's and getting new people is not going to make it any better. And you can have all the lawyers you like. It's the judges who are going to be slowing you down because you're going to be coming up against liberals who are then not going to have 25-year-olds representing them in court.
No.
They're going to have the old firm turning up. So that's a problem for him as well. Let's just say that another thing, which the 2 words you didn't mention, probably the only 2 words in English language you didn't mention in that answer was the words lame and duck. Like, it's an iron law of politics that when you become a lame duck, it takes very little time before people start to not pay as much attention to you, even if you're Trump. And so they're not going to spend 4 years doing whatever they want. They're going to start. He's going to start becoming irrelevant. Well, okay, he's Trump. He's not going to be completely irrelevant. But he's going to be a lot more irrelevant than he thinks he's going to be. I promise you. So there's that as well.
But and I mean, this is a point I just want to re-emphasize: is the shadow of the future. When Trump is gone, what is that going to look like? Like, people are going to be positioning themselves for that moment. People who have put their own career ambitions on hold for quite a long time are going to be desperate by 2027 to position themselves for something greater. We don't know if by then, what public perception of Trump will be like, but it could potentially be a lot lower than it is now. Like, this actually could be Trump could have turned into the George W. Bush of the Republican Party.
Yeah, that's true.
By then, and it actually might be people wanting to cast Trumpism off. So, yeah.
Another question is, what do you want this Trump force to do?
Yes.
He has no policies. Now, it's fine. Stephen Miller is going to take care of immigration.
Yes,
sure.
yeah.
But apart from him, there's nothing he wants to do.
Yeah.
And so it's just a waste. It's just pointless.
Yes, yeah.
But now, having said that, I'm not saying that this isn't bad.
Yes, yeah.
I think this is terrible, but not because of the reasons of, the Trump Stasi marching in time. That's not what I'm concerned about. What I'm concerned about is him just destroying the bureaucry.
That's right.
And it doesn't come back once it's destroyed.
Now, I think if Robert Frank, who was the author of What's the Matter with Kansas, sorry, not Robert Frank, Thomas Frank.
Yeah.
If Thomas Frank, who was the author of What's the Matter with Kansas, was here, he would say, yes, and all of this is evidence that Trump isn't some new fascist break. Trump is just a continuation of the Republican program of destroy the government as much as possible so that people have really bad experiences with the government, completely lose trust in the government, and that then justifies a program of not funding the government or not having a government that interferes with the economy in any way. So he would certainly make the argument Trump's actually going to pursue a very traditional Republican program here of just making the government as bad as possible in order to destroy people's faith in it.
Quite possibly, yeah. Because also, if he puts in all these hacks, then the Democrats have two choices.
Yeah.
Either they continue with the Trump force as their bureaucracy, or they do it again.
Yeah.
So then there's more inexperience.
Well, that's right. Yes, yeah, yeah. So he would give them that would give them the legal mechanism to to do it.
But it's not in anyone's advantage to keep on turning over the bureaucracy. So they'd want to stop at some point in time, but they can't just sit there with the hacks in the bureaucracy.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's worked anywhere knows how important institutional memory is. Like on the one hand, you don't want a completely stagnant workforce. You always want new ideas and new energy, but you need to have veterans, right? You need to have people who actually know how everything works and who can, remember things that happened in the past. If you remove that, you're completely fucked.
Yeah. I'll give you one example, which I wrote down here from Jonathan Carl's book, about just illustrating, by the way, about. Oh, yeah, actually, before I read this, I'll just say the other thing is that let's just say he succeeds.
Yes.
Let's just say he has 54,000, I think that's the number, 54,000 of this of this workforce just marching in time wherever he wants.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, what they're going to do then is follow his brain.
Yes.
Which is chaotic.
Yes.
It doesn't go in any single direction.
Yes.
Right? Like it doesn't stay the course in any direction. It just goes one way, another way. I'll read you the kind of chaos which you get from Jonathan Carl. This is how Trump's first term ended up. So Defense Secretary Senior Advisor Douglas McGregor advised Johnny McEntee. Johnny McEntee was like his body man kind of dog.
Yeah. He was there's nobody who became one of Trump's most valued staff.
And he's going to be back.
Yes.
Douglas McGregor advised him the priority should be the Afghanistan withdrawal and that it should be put in a presidential directive. But when McEntee couldn't figure out how to draft such a document, McGregor told him and his assistant to open up a cabinet, find an old presidential decision memorandum and copy it. McEntee and his assistant wrote up the order, had the president sign it and send it off to Kash Patel, the new acting Defense Secretary's chief of staff. But when no one could say where it came from, he and Defense Secretary Miller went to the White House for answers. Joint Chief of Staff Chair Mark Milley asked O'Brien, Trump's national security advisor, where the document came from. O'Brien said he'd never seen it before. Also at that meeting was Vice President Mike Pence's national security advisor, Keith Kellogg, who looked at the order and told the room, this doesn't look right. You're telling me this thing is forged? Milley responded in disbelief. That's a forged piece of paper directing a military operation by the President of the United States? That's forged, Keith? Milley asked, according to the excerpts. The group eventually asked Trump directly, who confirmed that he had signed it. O'Brien then told Trump it would be very bad and advised him to not follow through with the directive. As soon as he realized that an Afghanistan withdrawal would require more work than having McEntee scribble up a note, Trump dropped it entirely. Now, that is an insight into the future.
Yes.
Right there. When people are actually just doing whatever he wants.
Yes, yeah,
it's
yeah.
just chaotic, confused.
Yes.
And if Trump is telling where to go, he'll just go, screw it, let's move on to the next thing. Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's not stable government that you're hearing now.
This is also another reason why I wouldn't call him a fascist. Like, does someone like that have the energy and imagination to, create a completely regimented society?
No, probably not. No. Okay, so the other areas, which we should probably just touch on at least. There was the Insurrection Act.
Yes.
There's a lot about that, which was, do you have anything to say about that?
Not really,
Okay,
no.
so I'll just summarize this very briefly.
Yep.
The federal military forces are usually barred from enforcing civilian laws by the Posse Comitatus Act. There is one exception, which is when there's an insurrection. The Insurrection Act gives the president the authority to deploy the military to assist law enforcement agencies when the state government requests it. If there's an insurrection in that state, when the president deems that military deployment is necessary to enforce the laws of the US or to suppress a rebellion, or 3, when the president deems such deployment necessary to suppress, quote, any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination or conspiracy in a state whose government is unable or unwilling to enforce the constitutional rights of its citizens or opposes or obstructs the execution of the laws of the United States or impedes the course of justice under those laws. Now, importantly, insurrection, rebellion, and domestic violence and unlawful combination or conspiracy, none of those are defined.
No.
And the person who gets to decide is the president. They're very broad terms.
Yes.
So he gets to use that a lot. He gives them a lot of wiggle room. Let's say he oversteps the mark. Well, then you go to court. And in hindsight, they say it was unlawful.
Yes.
In hindsight.
Yeah.
So he has a lot of power to use the Insurrection Act. Now, a reason why this is important is because the person right now who's drafting his policy about this is a little fellow by the name of Jeff Clark, who you may recall from the indictment. But back in 2020, he was the one who, when the deputy White House counsel warned him that Trump refusing to leave office would lead to riots in every major city, he responded, according to the indictment, with, "That's why there's an Insurrection Act."
Yes.
He's the guy in charge of drafting Trump's Insurrection Act policy. So now I should say that when this article came out, the Heritage spokesperson, who was supposedly involved in this, said there are no plans within Project 2025, that's what they call it, related to the Insurrection Act or targeting political enemies. So maybe it's not true.
Well, it's not on their website.
No.
You can go and look at their website, project2025.org or something.
Yeah. But anyway, that is something that people are worried about, whether there's any reason to worry about it or not. That is something they're worried about.
Yeah. And I don't want to detract from how bad all of this stuff could actually be. Like, it definitely could be very authoritarian. It really could massively degrade the standard of government in the United States, and it could lead to a certain level of moral degeneration, not the mass indifference leading to the sort of stuff under narcissism, but you could definitely imagine the kind of social conflict that you saw in Northern Ireland or Italy or Chile or Spain, and the violence associated with that.
That's if it happens.
Yes.
And the reason I keep on saying that is I mean I'm going to contradict myself in a second, but the reason I keep on saying that is because I'm seeing precious little evidence of any of this coming from Trump.
Yes.
And it's very clear that Joe Biden's strategy in the upcoming election is to make people scared of Trump.
Yes.
And so it would suit him nicely if there were lots of articles coming out of the New York Times and Washington Post over the next few months saying, "Oh, this is what Trump's going to do."
Yeah.
None of it's coming from Trump. So like maybe it's real, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
But just want to flag that.
Yes.
Another thing from the New York Times. Bolstered by, I'm going to read the quote, bolstered by agents reassigned from other federal law enforcement agencies and state police and the National Guard, officials with immigration and customs enforcement would carry out sweeping raids aimed at deporting millions of people each year. Military funds would be used to erect sprawling camps to hold undocumented detainees. And people are quite worried about that. Now that rings true to me because Stephen Miller would definitely want that.
He would definitely do that, yes.
Yeah. I would be interested to see well, see how many Australians feel free to criticise the sprawling detention centre camps.
Yes.
That's kind of our national specialty for those who don't remember. So, yes. Yeah, so, there is that. But, I mean, like, people like the drama of, or not people, Stephen Miller likes the drama of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've said this 1,000 times now on this podcast and elsewhere. Just pass e-verify. You don't need to deport people. Just stop hiring them.
Yes.
If they're an illegal immigrant, don't hire them.
Yeah.
Really, really easy.
Yeah, but that would take all of the drama out of it.
I know. But anyway.
All the drama and the potential violence.
Yeah.
Yes.
And talking about which, another thing that people are going on about is the weaponizing the FBI and weaponizing the Department of Justice element, which certainly accords with what we understand Trump tried to happen during his first term.
Exactly, yes. Now, okay, so, and I do have some thoughts on this. And this was, this is one of the warnings that was made about Trump before he took office, the way that he would try to weaponize the justice system against his opponents. There are limits to that. There are limits to what you can do. Now, Trump is basically promoting these fantasies of all-powerful prosecutors, unconstrained by anything, just able to punish the president's enemies. That's the fantasy he's peddling. We've got to remember, part of that fantasy is actually his own explanation to his supporters of what is happening to him. The idea that there are all of these lawless prosecutors out there who can just do whatever they want in the service of the president to punish his enemies. In reality, it doesn't work that way. So when Trump said he was going to appoint a real special prosecutor to go after Joe Biden, why did he use this term real special prosecutor? Because he's still stinging from the John Durham experience. So John Durham was appointed special counsel in 2019 to look into the origins of the Russia investigation, was given a huge amount of power, was given the civil service protection, was made impossible to fire. After years and years of investigations, he laid charges against 3 people. 2 of them got off. They were all pretty minor players to begin with. The other one pleaded guilty to some kind of minor charge and didn't serve any prison time. His report didn't find any evidence of the Clinton-led conspiracy theory that Trump wanted. This is despite the fact that Trump was talking about this as the crime of the century. And even in the lead up to the release of the Durham report, they were expecting to see something massive. No, I'm not saying that there is no such thing as prosecutorial, abuse in the United States. And certainly prosecutors are considered pretty powerful in the system. But there are still limits to their power. And one of those limits is when there's no evidence, unless you're actually prepared to fabricate it, which once again is something that has happened in the past but gets a bit harder to do the more high profile the case is, you can't, there's not a lot you can do. Unless Trump's special prosecutor can actually find more evidence of Biden's wrongdoing than the House Judiciary Committee has been able to find so far, that's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to be more disappointment. So, yeah, I mean, and also Trump's talking about using the justice system against people like Mark Milley. Executing Mark Milley for treason. Using it against John Kelly, using it against Mark Esper. Like, what is he going to get these people on? Yeah. They're, even in an authoritarian system, there's still limits to how much you can actually bend the law to your will in this way.
Look, that's true. What I would say to that, though, and this is harking back to conversations we had 4 years ago as much as anything, that in a weaponized DOJ environment, the issue is not cooking up allegations that you can then get people thrown in jail for. The issue is letting people off.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Like, and you can definitely do that.
Oh, yeah,
and he did do that.
Yes, yeah.
Like, i.e. Roger Stone, for instance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and he'll let a lot of the January 6th rioters go and issue them an apology and stuff. Yeah. And I suppose you could...
So if there's an air of impunity for his people, that creates its own problems.
It does, yes. Yeah. No, that is absolutely true. Yeah. That is true. Yes.
So you were about to say something there?
Yeah. So, yes, that's the way that the justice system gets weaponized. It's empowering your own people, not punishing your enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I that once again, I'm being a bit of a broken record here, but the grab that people are using most to illustrate this danger is his interview with Univision.
Oh, yes.
Right? And I'll just play here for the people at home.
Yep.
You say they've weaponized the Justice Department, they weaponized the FBI. Would you do the same if you're reelected?
Well, he's unleashed something that we've all known about this for 100 years. We've watched other countries do it. And in some cases effective, and in other cases the country's overthrown or it's been totally ineffective. But we've watched this for a long time, and it's not unique, but it's unique for the United States. Yeah, if they do this, they've already done it. But if they want to follow through on this, it could certainly happen in reverse. It could certainly happen in reverse. What they've done is they've released the genie out of the box. You understand that? They've done something that nobody thought would happen. They've taken a president who was very popular. I got 75 million votes, much more than that, I believe. Mm-hmm. No president's ever gotten that many votes. And they've taken that number of people, and I think you can double it or almost you can triple it in terms of the feeling. You can't do that. You can't go after people. You know, when you're president and you've done a good job and you're popular, you don't go after them so you can win an election. They've done indictments in order to win an election. They call it weaponization. And the people aren't going to stand for it. But yeah, they have done something that allows the next party. I mean, if I happen to be president and I see somebody who's doing well and beating me very badly, I say, go down and indict them. Mostly that would be, they would be out of business. They'd be out. They'd be out of the election.
I played that long because most people haven't played it long, including Planet America, I might say.
Oh, shame.
Yeah, I know.
Shame.
I'm kind of shaming my own show here. But I didn't, I'm going to make an admission I really shouldn't make.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen the full clip.
You had not seen the
when that was played on our show. I didn't play it. You can guess who did. but then when I went back and had a look at the whole interview, I thought, I'm not sure people have seen this whole clip. I feel like Trump is clearly talking in hypotheticals there. Yeah. He's not talking about himself. No. He's not talking about, like, this is what I'm going to do in my second term. Yeah. Having said that, I'm not saying he wouldn't try and weaponize the FBI. No. I'm just saying that in that case, the smoking gun which people are talking about, I don't think is a smoking gun. No. I think that is him just saying what Biden's doing is wrong in his view, and then talking hypotheticals about why it's wrong. Yes. That's how I'm interpreting it. Having said that, there's enough testimony from Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions and the Mueller report about what things that he tried to do behind the scenes that people didn't let him do. For me to think, he probably is going to try and pull some shifties on the DOJ. The only other thing is the rhetoric. You've mentioned it a few times. Yes. Do you take anything out of the vermin? I'll play the vermin clip for those who don't know what I'm talking about.
Today, especially in honor of our great veterans on Veterans Day, we pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country, that lie and steal and cheat on elections and will do anything possible. They'll do anything, whether legally or illegally, to destroy America and to destroy the American dream. The real threat is not from the radical right. The real threat is from the radical left, and it's growing every day, every single day. The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Do you take anything out of that?
I think that is dangerous.
Yep.
Because it encourages violence.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yep.
That will encourage Americans to commit violence against other Americans.
The dehumanization you're talking about.
Absolutely. Yes.
What I would say about that is that was written in his auto cue.
Yep.
He doesn't write his own auto cue.
No.
He's never used the word vermin once on social media. I checked.
Yep.
Never once. The word he likes to use? Animal.
Yes.
That's the Trump word.
That's right.
That's the word used for MS-13.
Yes, yeah.
That's he's used that a heap. Animal. But he didn't call them animals. He called them vermin.
Yep.
So that's the reason why I'm almost 100% sure that's Stephen Miller.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. No question.
Having said that, the fact that, like, if this was Trump who wrote Vermin, you'd
Yep.
go, does he know it's a Nazi thing or not? You wouldn't be 100% sure.
No.
Because he's not terribly educated. Stephen Miller, 100%
Absolutely
knows it's Nazi. So you go, okay, if Stephen Miller is intentionally leading into Nazi rhetoric, what the fuck is he doing?
Yes, yeah.
Why? What's going on? Like that's a concern in itself for me.
Yes, yeah.
The fact that he 100% knows he's leaning into Nazi rhetoric and doing it.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no answer for that.
This is
but it
entirely
just worries me.
consistent with his, with what he did in Trump's office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I brought up before, going,
Yeah.
maybe Trump's not the fascist, but maybe
yeah.
Stephen Miller is.
Yeah.
And maybe if he's powerful enough, like there could be fascist results, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. And you mentioned the final thing as well. So you mentioned the retribution. The retribution.
Yes.
That's another bit of rhetoric we've seen recently. I am your warrior. I am your justice. For those who have been wronged and betrayed, of which there are many people out there that have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution.
Yeah.
Now, to me, that's declaring war against half the country. People said
It is, yes,
People
yeah.
said that was what the
Yes.
deplorables thing was.
Yes, yeah.
I always thought that was bullshit.
Yes, yeah.
But this is.
This actually is
This
declaring
actually
war.
is.
Yes,
This actually
yeah.
say, I am going to be your retribution, my
Yes, yeah,
people,
yeah.
against the other people.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you agree? Yeah.
I absolutely agree. This is one final thing that I want to point out about the difference between Trumpism and fascism, at least as sort of classically understood, and that's the role of religion in it. So this book opens with this anecdote from Samuel Beckett.
Are we putting this in the list?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who was visiting Germany in 1937, and he saw this this church which had a traditional greeting above the door, where the word for God was replaced with the word for Hitler. And the kinds of Italy, Catholic country. Germany got both Catholic and Protestant elements in it, but they're both Catholicism and Protestantism in Germany, as traditionally practiced, were very kind of liturgical and hierarchical. They were structures that could be put in their place, that could be rendered subservient to the state. And I mean, there's a lot of debate about the exact roles that the Catholic Church had in these regimes, but certainly they were kind of subservient to it. Now, in the United States, the most powerful form of Christianity is evangelical Protestantism. That is a far more kind of unruly thing. And really, in order to channel the power of evangelical Protestantism, Trump kind of has to harness its energy rather than subjugating it. And when Trump is using terms like retribution, when he uses all of this apocalyptic language, part of what he is doing is channeling the charismatic Christian worldview of we're living in the end times and there is a final battle approaching between the forces of light and the forces of darkness, and God is going to punish his enemies. Now, in that view, God is actually not subservient to the Trumpian order. God is part of it. Trump is fighting alongside God in that picture. That's very different from the kind of fascist vision where the church is actually below to the extent that it still exists, and this is why the Nazis often drew on all of this pre-Christian pagan stuff. So the role of religion is actually quite different in all of this as well, and it means that religion remains a force of its own, a very powerful force of its own in society.
Okay.
Even if it's very sort of integrated with Trumpism in a lot of ways, it's not subjugated in the same way that religion was in fascism.
I'm not. Maybe this fits into what you're saying, but I had one more bit of rhetoric as well, which I wanted to highlight as well. Which was where is it? It's here. 2024 is our final battle. With you at my side, we'll demolish the deep state. We will expel the warmongers from our government. We will drive out the globalists. We will cast out the communists, Marxists, and fascists. We will throw off the sick political class that hates our country. We will rout the fake news media. We will evict Joe Biden from the White House, and we will finish the job once and for all. Now, people heard that and they said, "Final battle? Does he mean final solution?" And they're like, the Hitler parallels again. Yeah. I'm not going there, but what I am saying is that the concept behind it, the idea that there's just one more push to thwart all our enemies once and for all. They'll all just give in and that will be the end and we'll have our final glorious victory. That thought is a very authoritarian thought. It's
very authoritarian.
And extremely unrealistic.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously never going to happen. And as a little aside, it's the same rhetoric that I'm a bit worried about from Netanyahu at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's the same thing about we're going to finish it once and for all. That's it.
Yeah.
Like I find that concerning.
Yeah. No, it's very authoritarian. But in Trump's case, it's also tapping into apocalyptic thinking within Christianity.
Yeah.
When he talks about the final battle, he's talking about the victory of God over Satan.
Yeah, so it does fit in.
If you think about the last book of the Chronicles of Narnia is called The Last Battle. And Chronicles of Narnia is an absolute cultural touchstone for for a lot of his followers. So this is why I would actually distinguish it from fascism. One of the reasons I would distinguish it from fascism.
I want to play one clip which I found I sort of thought of it almost as a, I mean, obviously it's not about me, but I thought of it as a chastisement of the view which I have expressed many times now.
Yes.
Of saying, hang on, none of this is coming from Trump.
Right, yeah.
Like, except apart from the rhetoric.
Yes.
All the other stuff's none of it comes from Trump. Like, Joe Biden wants people to be scared of Trump. The Democrats, this is their strategy.
Yes, yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm getting sucked in when I start talking about this kind of stuff. And so I just keep on making those cautions. But I mean, Joe Scarborough, this is what he had to say about my kind of people. And I want to see what your reaction is to this, Dave.
When people go, oh, you can't compare him to past Nazi leaders. You can't compare him to this past Nazi leader or that past fascist leader because he hasn't done that. Well, what hasn't he done? He hasn't done the things that the American judicial system did not allow him to do last time, but may very well allow him to do this time, or a judicial system that will be ignored by Donald Trump and ran over by Donald Trump to create the greatest constitutional crisis of our lifetimes. Just because he hasn't done it yet doesn't mean he won't do it when he gets a chance to do it. And if he is voted into office, then a lot of these people that are talking about literal or figurative or whatever the hell they're saying, you're going to look like idiots because he will get away with, he will imprison, he will execute whoever he's allowed to imprison, execute, drive from the country. Just look at his past. It's not really hard to read.
What are your thoughts?
I think that I've had this problem ever since 2021 with all of these kinds of fantasies about what Trump will do as an authoritarian. They always seem to assume that there won't be any resistance to it. There will be resistance. There will be resistance that Trump can't do anything about, and it's going to come from all kinds of quarters. There was plenty of resistance the first time around to what he did. And if he finds ways around some of that, there is going to be more resistance as well. So, I mean, the whole thing, he'll do whatever he's allowed to do. There are a lot of things he will not be allowed to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not minimizing any of how bad Trump's second term could actually be. Like, it could be incredibly violent. It could be very, it could be very chaotic. As I say, it could just massively reduce the quality of government and even the quality of life in the United States. But there are limits to what Trump can do. Okay. And part of the limits are his own competence and the competence of the people around him.
That's my take.
Yeah.
My take is it presumes a lot of the competence.
Yes.
It presumes,
I've just sent you a link.
Yep.
Which I would like you to play.
Oh, okay, sure.
Because I want to show that some of this stuff is actually not very new, especially the debates around what is fascist and what is not.
Wow. Okay.
So this is a debate between Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley from 1961. Okay, so this is very famous. This is on PBS's what was that show called? I can't remember. But anyway, Vidal and Buckley absolutely hated each other. They were public intellectuals who this altercation that you see, this is not for show. They absolutely hated each other. They're both the same age. So they were both, I think they were both 17 when they enlisted in the military in 1944. So but they were from completely opposite sides of politics, and they completely hated each other. So this is them having an argument about the Vietnam War.
Okay, let's go.
Mr. Vidal, wasn't it a provocative act to try to raise the Viet Cong flag in the park in the film we just saw? Wouldn't that invite raising a Nazi flag in World War II would have had similar consequences?
People in the United States happen to believe that the United States policy is wrong in Vietnam, and the Viet Cong are correct in wanting to organize their country in their own way politically. If it is a novelty in Chicago, that is too bad. But I assume that the point of the American democracy is you can express any point of view you want. Shut up a minute.
No, I won't. Some people were pro-Nazi, and the answer is that they were well treated by people who ostracized them, and I'm for ostracizing people who egg on other people to shoot American Marines and American soldiers. I know you don't care.
As far as I'm concerned, the only sort of pro or crypto-Nazi I can think of is yourself. Failing that, only say that we can't have.
Now listen, you
the right of assembly.
Stop calling me a crypto-Nazi.
Let's stop calling names.
You in your goddamn face, and you'll stay plastered.
Gentlemen,
let the author of Myra Breckenridge go back to his pornography and stop making any allusions of Nazism to somebody who was in the infantry in the last war.
You were not in the infantry, as a matter of fact. You didn't fight in the infantry.
So look, we've got it all there. Okay, even though they both speak in these upper class patrician accents, because they both came from very distinguished political families.
I miss when people abuse each other with the British accents.
Yeah. You've got one calling the other a crypto-Nazi. You got the other responds, "Listen, you queer," because Vidal was one of the very few openly gay people in the United States. Threatening violence, saying, "Listen, you queer, if you call me a crypto-Nazi, I'll sock you in the face and you'll stay plastered." And then finishes with an argument about exactly who did what in the war. And just for the record, both of them stayed completely in the United States in the war. Buckley was in the continental United States, and Vidal was on a ship that was stationed in the Aleutian Islands. But so this stuff is not completely new. Let's put it that way.
No, that's fair enough. Okay, well, I was just going to finish off with two thoughts.
Yes.
One is that I haven't actually said what my view about all this is.
What is your view?
My view is quite short, actually. So it's
okay,
all right. My view essentially is I agree with you about the impediments facing Trump, and I think that the goose stepping kind of jackbooted thugs, etc. I'm not so worried about that. Yeah, but I think that most of that stuff, like I said, didn't necessarily come from Trump, and I don't think he'd implemented it effectively. The rhetoric is coming from Trump. Yes. Right? Even if he doesn't write it, it's still coming from him. And that actually concerns me more, because I think the greatest impact that Trump has had on America so far has been on the social compact. It's been, absolutely. He has accelerated the partisanship, the nastiness, the anger, absolutely. The alienation, all that kind of stuff. He does that with his mouth. And I'm most concerned about a second term of Trump, that he will continue that process. And the rhetoric and all that kind of stuff, the hatred that is coming through in the rhetoric, I think is just going to be ramped up. And I think that when the people who are expecting glorious victory find only more frustration, he will reflect that with even more anger and more hatred and more alienation. And I'm concerned about about the social compact in America being torn. I don't like to use the word irreversibly, but badly.
Yes, yeah.
Like so much worse than it already is. And you're right. There are traditions in America, and one of them is extreme violence.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm really concerned about it. And the other thing, that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think I have reason to be concerned about that.
You absolutely do.
And there are a lot more he shredded a lot of norms in his first term, and there's a lot more norms he can still shred.
Yeah.
And every single one of them cuts deeper in the way America's run.
Yes.
And I'm really concerned about where America goes after that. And the thing I'm most concerned about is from a clip from Steve Bannon, of all people, that really, I just thought, I think he's right, and it's this.
What you're saying is, even if Trump lost to Biden, there's no going back to the old Republican Party.
Farther right than Trump.
Farther right.
President Trump is a moderate in our movement. You're going to pine in future years that you wished Donald Trump was around.
Now that's classic circus with the stupid background music, dramatic effect. But I think his point about, now that's obviously wishful thinking from Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
But I think he's right. I think that Donald Trump is a moderate in that movement.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that if there is if the movement continues past Trump, and I'm not saying it will, but if it does continue past Trump, I think the people coming after him, especially after a second term of Trump, are going to be scary people.
Yes. But another caveat on that, part of Trump's power comes from his charismatic leadership.
Yeah.
Okay. It comes from the number of people who think that he's got these divine qualities.
Yeah.
Steve Miller doesn't have that. Steve Bannon doesn't have that. Ron DeSantis doesn't have that. Right. All the people that you can immediately think of to the right, most people take one look at them and like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. Trump's charismatic power is a bit sui generis within this movement. I've said before, I think that the only person who does a credible impression of Donald Trump is Donald Trump Jr., and he doesn't do it that well. So, I think that it's going to be hard for them to keep that movement going once he's actually, gone.
That's a fair point. And just to contradict everything I've just said, just because it's just a point I read from someone else, and I thought it's worth mentioning.
Yes.
I've forgotten where I read this, but someone made the point that if you look at history, when an elected leader with authoritarian tendencies spends time out of power, when they come back, they come back a lot worse. And the two examples in the article I read were Orban in Hungary, and Netanyahu in Israel. And it's like we should if you're doing what I'm doing and thinking about the first term and then projecting forward, that might be a mistake in hindsight. But anyway, we've probably talked enough about this topic.
Yep.
It was the first.
We're about 100 minutes into the podcast at this point.
The first about 6 topics. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do.
Yes.
There were so many things we were going to talk. I can't believe on Thanksgiving, when there's no news this week, we are going to have we're going to be even shorter of the prescribed material than we normally are. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do a quick stats nugget just to break it up a little bit.
Okay.
And then, damn it, I'm doing Biden, Missouri.
Okay.
Just because
do Biden, Missouri.
I am sick of not doing Biden, Missouri.
You can tell your grandkids about the moment that you heard about Biden, Missouri.
I mean, if I was caring about the news of the week, I would talk about Israel, because that's clearly the only story this week about the ceasefire, and I've got a lot to say about that, and about the hospital, but next week. Stats Nugget. Stats Nugget. Okay, Dave. Guessing time.
Yes.
I want to know the income.
Yep.
Where people want the least amount of extra money as a percentage of their income. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, like, if you go, how much extra money do you want?
Yeah.
And they say the amount of money, you express that as a percentage of their income. What income do you think that's the smallest number?
I've got no idea. No, I'm not even going to try.
You're not going to try?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, you'd think that would be when they're wealthier.
Yeah.
Because especially because they've got so much money.
Yes.
It'd be a small, like an extra few $1 million is a small percent. It's definitely not that. In fact, that's when they're it's kind of a U shape in a way.
Yeah.
But for the poor people, for the people under $25,000, it's 133% of their current income.
Right.
They would like.
Yep.
This is, by the way, this is a survey from Empower, which is in the Wall Street Journal.
Mm-hmm.
70 for $25,000 to $35,000 income, 73% extra money they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
For $35,000 to $50,000, it was 49%.
Mm-hmm. For
$50,000 to $75,000, it was 40. That was 49%. It's 43% for this one.
Yep.
For $75,000 to $100,000, it's 24% extra.
Right.
The lowest is from $100,000 to $150,000. They only want 14% more money.
Okay.
Whereas the people who earn more than $200,000 want 40% more money, which I found really interesting.
Yes.
It's a little sweet spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that comes from Kevin Drum. He's always.
I'm sure if you scaled that up to people who are like making over $1 million a year, it gets increased like 1,000% more.
It probably does.
2,000% more.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was really nice.
Yes.
Anyway, okay. Bye, Missouri. Damn it.
Okay.
All right.
Brace yourselves.
Okay, so about 2-3 weeks ago, it was when I was with Bill. I was talking about some of the other social media cases in the Supreme Court this term. This is the other big one. Okay, so background for this: social media companies, apart from in Florida and Texas, are free to decide who they ban and who they censor. Right.
Yes.
That's pretty established. Anyone can petition a social media company to make particular decisions. You can report someone from blocking, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But when does the government overstep the line by threatening a social media company with retaliation if they don't abide by their demands? The government can ask them to do something, but if the government threatens them, when does that become against the law? When does it effectively stop being a social media company censoring you, which is okay?
Yes.
They can do that.
Yep.
And when does it start becoming the government effectively censoring you through the social media company, which is not okay?
Not okay.
Okay. That's when censorship becomes a restriction of your First Amendment rights. And look, there's no precedent for these kinds of questions at all, which is why this is such an interesting case. In private media companies, there is a precedent. In Bloom versus Uretsky from 1982, that held that the government may be held responsible for a private media company's decision to alter its speech only when the government has exercised coercive power or has provided such significant encouragement, either overt or covert, that the choice must in law be deemed to be that of the state.
Okay.
That's the precedent.
Right.
Okay. Until
Got that?
Biden versus Missouri.
Okay.
Here are the facts.
Yes.
States of Missouri and Louisiana claim that the Biden administration colluded with big tech social media to censor the free speech of individuals in the government's COVID response. There's a few other ones, but the COVID response is the main one. This started right from the beginning of 2021. Clark Humphreys, the digital director of the COVID-19 response team, told Twitter to remove an anti-vaccine post by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's basically as soon as they got into power.
Yeah.
Hey folks, there's a quote, wanted to flag the below tweet and I'm wondering if we can get moving on the process of having it removed ASAP. The Deputy Assistant to the President, Rob Flaherty, Director of Digital Strategy at the White House, told Twitter to delete a parody account of Finnegan Biden, one of Biden's grandchildren. He said, quote, cannot stress the degree to which this needs to be resolved immediately. Please remove this account immediately. So far, what do you think? Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, just as we go, we'll just see.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. No problem so far. I agree. Flaherty emphasised that he was acting on the president's behalf. These concerns were shared at the highest, and I mean highest, levels of the White House. Okay?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Flaherty, the fifth, you're the judge here, Dave.
I'm not a judge of anything.
Flaherty, the Fifth Circuit notes, quote, demanded more details and data on Facebook's internal policies at least 12 times, asking what was being done to curtail dubious or sensational content, what interventions were being taken, what measurable impact the platform's moderation policies had, how much content was being demoted, and what misinformation was not being downgraded. So if you harass them, is that okay? If you just keep on asking, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? What are you doing about this? If you're a government, do you think that's all right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll keep going.
Yep.
Then there was a meeting where White House officials wanted to know why Alex Berenson, who's a journo who's not been kind to the COVID-19 vaccine, had not been kicked off Twitter. Andy Slavitt, who is one of the COVID-19 guys in the government, suggested Berenson was, quote, the epicenter of disinformation that radiated outwards to the persuadable public, and he should be kicked off at once. Flaherty wrote, we are gravely concerned that your service is one of the top drivers of vaccine hesitancy, period. I will also be the first to acknowledge that borderline content offers no easy solutions, but we want to know you're trying. We want to know how we can help. We want to know that you're not playing a shell game with us when we ask you what's going on. And then Andy Slavitt came in. Internally, we've been considering our options on what to do about it. How's that?
That's fine.
Okay. A number of these posts that they wanted to downgrade or demote didn't even violate Facebook's rules. The requests were sometimes phrased as demands, as I've already indicated. Facebook seemed to respond to them, but they weren't necessary. But the White House weren't happy with the results. Flaherty then sent an email. Are you guys fucking serious? I want an answer on what happened here, and I want it now.
He probably shouldn't have said fucking. Like, that's not very governmental language.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. But are we feeling coercive yet?
Not exactly, no.
Okay, all right, okay.
No, because Facebook always presented itself as this company that actually was responsible.
Yeah.
And that shared certain views with with the government about its responsibility. And if you're going to present yourself that way, then I think it is reasonable.
Yep. Okay. Then the comments started becoming public. In a press conference, Joe Biden was asked what his message was to social media platforms when it came to COVID-19 disinformation. Quote, these 12 people are out there giving misinformation. Anyone listening to it is getting hurt by it. It's killing people. Look, the only pandemic we have is amongst the unvaccinated, and that they're killing people. Surgeon General Murphy then said...
That's not true, that the pandemic was only among the unvaccinated.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's that they're killing people that people are focusing on. Surgeon General Murphy said about tech companies that, quote, misinformation is literally costing us our loved ones, costing us lives. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki declared the social media companies, quote, have a responsibility related to the health and safety of all Americans to stop amplifying untrustworthy content, disinformation, and misinformation, especially related to COVID-19 vaccines and elections. I'm okay with all that.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So far, despite the swearing, I take all of this so far as opinions.
Yes.
Yeah. Possibly passionate opinions at times.
Yes.
But still. Then the Surgeon General Murphy advocated for recommendations including appropriate legal and regulatory measures that address health and misinformation while protecting user privacy and freedom of expression. Psaki then says, quote, the president's view is that the major platforms have responsibility related to the health and safety of all Americans to stop amplifying untrustworthy content, disinformation and misinformation, especially related to COVID-19 vaccinations and elections. We've seen that over the past several months, broadly speaking. I'm not placing any blame on any individual group. We've seen it from a number of sources. He also supports better privacy protections and a robust antitrust program. So his view is that there's more that needs to be done to ensure that this type of misinformation, disinformation, damaging, sometimes life-threatening information is not going out to the American public.
So do you see that as a threat?
I see that as a threat. What I'm referring to there is he also supports better privacy protections and a robust antitrust program, which for those who don't know means he supports breaking up big companies.
I see that as a threat, but it's a threat I 100% support. So, yeah.
Then the White House Communications Director, Kate Bedingfield, said, when asked whether these companies should be held liable for publishing false information that causes people harm, we're reviewing that, and certainly they should be held accountable. I think you've heard the president speak very aggressively about this. I find that also a little bit threaty. Just a bit. Then Psaki said, in regard to problematic users on the platforms, the president has long been concerned about the power of large social media companies and that they must be held accountable for the harms they cause. She continued, the president has been a strong supporter of fundamental reforms to achieve that goal, including reforms of Section 230, enacting antitrust reforms, requiring more transparency and more. The Fifth Circuit cited this as the most coercive part, as a direct threat.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's basically as bad as it gets.
Yeah.
So, I don't mean in the world, I mean in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so what are your thoughts? Do you feel the government was overstepping the bounds or not?
No. And just to go to some of the other highlights of things that the Fifth Circuit have done recently, have sent to the Supreme Court, they want to declare the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau unconstitutional.
They do.
So this was something that was put in place after the global financial crisis to try to protect people from kinds of things that happen in the global financial crisis. They absolutely hate it. Like the fact that Elizabeth Warren put it in place is just such a red flag for a lot of people. So they want that to be unconstitutional. They also want domestic violence abusers to be able to hold on to their guns. This is the Fifth Circuit. This is their understanding of what personal freedom actually involves.
The Rani case, which is what you're referring to there, is complicated.
It is complicated.
It is complicated. Yes, you're
Yes.
right. You're not misrepresenting them.
This is our Fifth Circuit. Yes.
The Fifth Circuit, I mean, if we're going to turn this into the Fifth Circuit thing, I would just say that the Fifth Circuit is the Supreme Court, which is meant to be the most conservative Supreme Court ever, is making a real thing out of overturning the Fifth Circuit over and over again for being too conservative for them.
Yes.
So that is true. Having said that, in this case, the Fifth Circuit was overturning an even more extreme district court judge. The Fifth Circuit was relatively moderate compared to where this case came from. But anyway, let me tell you some thoughts. Coercion usually requires a very specific threat.
Yes.
I don't think vague antitrust threats get there.
Well, especially since everybody's talking about that at the moment.
Yeah.
Like Josh Hawley wrote an entire book about this, didn't he?
Yeah.
This is before he wrote his How to Be a Man book. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the Fifth Circuit said there was an unspoken or else in these comments, given the awesome power of the office. I would say by that standard, then the president will be acting coercively anytime the White House opens their mouth.
Awesome power of the office. Joe Biden can't executive order antitrust into existence.
This is one of the points I was about to make.
Yeah. No. That would depend on Congress.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But before I even get to that, I was just going to say, imagine holding, I'm not doing a what about here. I'm just doing a legal consistency thing here.
Yeah.
Imagine holding Trump over the last 4 years before Biden to the same standard.
Yes.
Okay. You can't have every time you open your mouth not being able to criticize things.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's overblown from the Fifth Circuit.
Yep.
The Fifth Circuit, though, did make a decent point that after this period of all this shit, the social media companies became much more compliant. Now, that is interesting in terms of looking at their behavior and going, well, they're acting like they've been bullied. Even if you think they haven't been bullied. I did think that was interesting. The day after the president spoke, Facebook emailed them asking what it could do to get back to a good place with the White House. It sought to, quote, better understand what the White House expects from us on misinformation going forward. So they acted like they were cowed.
Yes.
So there is that. But also, and the platforms did begin to more aggressively take down content as well after this. Even people who weren't in violation of their policies, they took down after this period. So, yeah. But at the same time, there were plenty of times they didn't take down things that the government asked them for as well.
Yeah.
You know, so and also I would argue that what the government did, like some of those messages, I would say were inappropriate.
Yeah.
But illegal. I mean, you're depriving the government of their freedom of speech as well, you know, if you're going to stop them saying they're doing this kind of stuff. So I think there's a high standard to remove the government's freedom of speech.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't think it gets there myself. But I mean, I am sort of uneasy about this.
Is taking down posts really such a violation of freedom of speech?
Well, if the government's making you take down someone else's speech,
you're not actually prohibiting that speech. You're just saying you don't want it on a really prominent platform.
Yeah, isn't that the same thing?
No.
I think
prohibiting it is if you say this, you're going to jail.
Well, the courts don't interpret the First Amendment as just simply being about being jailed.
Yeah, no, it's true that they don't. But like, there's nothing to there's nothing to stop people from saying this. It's about whether it gets broadcasted. Over a platform. And
well, look, you are Smith J, so I do also think the point you made back before is a very important point. There is no threat of any worth. If Congress have no chance of enacting it.
Yeah.
And antitrust legislation was not going to happen. Especially involving Republicans. Because the Democrats were unhappy with the social media treatment of COVID. So I just don't think. I think it was just a toothless threat, even if it was a threat. So I'm a bit uneasy in that respect as well. Look, the bottom line is what the Fifth Circuit said was this: what they were left with. Defendants and their employees and agents shall take no actions, formal or informal, directly or indirectly, to coerce or significantly encourage social media companies to remove, delete, suppress, or reduce, including through altering their algorithms, posted social media content containing protected free speech. That includes but is not limited to compelling the platforms to act, such as by intimating that some form of punishment will follow a failure to comply with any request, or supervising, directing, or otherwise meaningfully controlling the social media company's decision-making process. Now, I actually think, despite what I just said, that very lengthy line there actually is not an unreasonable line. I mean, it's they weren't that, like, leaving aside whether I would argue that nothing that I just read out violated that. Like, I think that is not a bad line, but there is one thing which I find problematic in this area, which is, it's okay for government to engage in urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing the platforms to remove content, according to the court. But it's not okay for them to undertake in coercion or significant encouragement. So they can encourage, but they can't significantly encourage. What the fuck is that?
Okay, yeah. Do
you see my point?
Yes, yeah.
It's so vague. It's just so, what does that mean? It's just so vague. The court said significant encouragement was the government exercising some active, meaningful control over the private decision. I mean, this is splitting hairs. You know, it's just the court said they exercise this control by entangling themselves in the company's content moderation decisions through repeated interaction and conversation. I just don't see how you can define any of this.
No.
And I should also say this is all incredibly hypocritical, especially from the Fifth Circuit, because they were okay with Net Choice versus Paxton. Which was if you recall, the Texas case where the government was explicitly telling social media companies they weren't allowed to moderate conservatives. Which is a huge violation of freedom of speech. So there'll be massive hypocrites. But leaving aside from that, there needs to be some kind of law about this. So there needs to be some kind of standard, because this is going to be a problem if it's not already. And I don't know where it is. It's just so vague. I just don't know where you can draw. I actually have no idea what the answer is, which is why I find it such an interesting case. And I'm really interested to see what the Supreme Court has to say about it. Do you have any thoughts?
No.
No, it's okay, fair enough. Well, I will. I'm gonna. Okay, this is an indication of just how long I've had this sitting around for. The next bit was going to be a little bit on one other social media example, which I wanted to ask your view on. And these two words I'm about to say are going to tell you just how old this story is. It's been sitting around on my computer. Those two words are Russell Brand.
Oh, wow.
That's how old. Okay. All right, so I don't want to dwell on the allegations. It's not about the allegations, right? It's about the social media ramifications of the allegations. But just for those who don't even remember what I'm talking about, essentially there was a TV show called Dispatches in England, which aired a bunch of old allegations about sexual abuse, rape involving Russell Brand. Often with these tabloids, you're never sure, who to believe, who not. These ones, it was pretty fucking clear what was going on. He texted one of the women to apologize. She texted him When a girl says no, she means no. He replied with, I will make this up to you. That same day, that same woman went to a rape crisis center. The Times saw her medical records from the visit. And then a little later, she wrote him a letter. All this evidence exists.
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
so this is pretty well evidenced. Now, none of this is going to court. He hasn't been found guilty of anything. There is no, none of these are, he hasn't even been arrested for any of these. Okay, so these are just allegations. They are well evidenced allegations.
Yes.
But they are just allegations. Okay, so how does this relate to social media? Do you think it's appropriate for Carolyn by the way, this is Planet Britain. This is
Yes.
the incipient Planet Britain. Do you think it's appropriate for Carolyn Dinenage, the chair of the House of Commons Culture, Media and Sport Committee, to send out letters to social media companies like YouTube and Rumble
Yeah.
saying, while we recognise that X is not the creator of the content published by Mr. Brand, we are concerned that he may be able to profit from his content on the platform. We will be grateful if you could confirm whether Mr. Brand is able to monetize his content, including his videos relating to the serious accusations against him. If so, we would like to know whether X, and I was just saying X like it's Twitter, it was Rumble, YouTube, whatever, intends to join whatever, in suspending Mr. Brand's ability to earn money on the platform.
She can do whatever she wants because there ain't no First Amendment on Planet Britain.
That's true. But let's go back to Planet America for a second.
Yeah.
Would that be? Do you think that's acceptable from the American government where there's a First Amendment right?
I don't know.
You know, I don't think it is. I think that seems like significant encouragement, to use the phrase from the Fifth Circuit.
Yeah.
I know what significant encouragement is, but it's that.
Yes.
And then my other question about that is, what about demonetization of someone who hasn't actually had any charges against them? Like in the case of Russell Brand, he, like social media, like let's take Rumble for instance, or YouTube or whatever. Like he has been demonetized by certain social media outfits for the allegations.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's legit or not?
Yeah, private companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay, but let's leave. I mean, yes, legally, yes.
Yes.
Do you think that's fair enough though? Do you think that should happen? If you're the private company.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's
I
the
think you've got to
logic?
make your own, like, there are things which for certain reasons are never going to go through the proper legal process. I think they're within their rights to, to make judgments about these things, not just legal rights, but moral rights.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree. And the reason I agree, I agree with what you said, but I have another point to add to that.
Okay.
Which is I think people are complaining about that, and a lot of people are complaining about that.
Yeah.
I've seen it from Russell Brand's point of view, which is fair enough. They're on Russell Brand's side for whatever reason, politically probably.
Yes.
But what about the advertiser's point of view?
Yeah.
Like when they buy an ad,
yes,
you can bet your life they're not buying it to be on Mr. Rapist page. No. Right? Yeah, they're buying an ad for Rumble or for YouTube or for whatever. Yeah. And it's not fair to them to end up on someone controversial.
No.
Like, and it's not just about charge. It's not just about crimes.
Yes.
Even if they said something controversial, they shouldn't be forced, if they want to add on YouTube, to be on someone's page or video that's going to hurt their market share. Like, that seems really unfair to the advertiser and bad business sense for the business to make them do that. Then they lose advertisers as a result of that. So I think that's fair enough from just a capitalist point of view.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, so I would throw that, and like you just can't slap a Monday.com video ad next to a Russell Brand video and not expect there to be.
Yes, yeah.
Now, okay, so we're almost out of time. Just once again, I was expecting to do this back in June.
Yeah,
I've saved it, so I just want to just quickly address a couple of the reactions to all this stuff that really annoyed me.
Yes, yeah,
and it won't take long.
Yes.
Some on the right are saying, well, why didn't they go after Brand back then? Why are they going after Brand now? Like they're talking about the allegations.
Yes,
here. Yeah. Like they're saying, oh, these are sus because they're doing it now because he's talking, he's the voice of the people now, so people want to shut him up with these allegations, right? Firstly, this the allegations originate from before Me Too.
Yeah.
At that point in time, you didn't come forward with allegations because you got squashed by lawyers.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Secondly, we know why they didn't come out 10 years ago, because in this case, someone did go after Russell Brand at the time. That someone was Catherine Ryan. She went after him on Celebrity Roast Battle. She made some remarks about his track record with women.
Yes.
And he wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And she referred obliquely to this on Louis Theroux recently. She said, the clip's been taken down online, unfortunately, but I've written down the quote. I, in front of loads of people in the format of the show, said to this person's face that they are a predator. This person, I believe very strongly, many people believe very strongly, is an open secret, is a perpetrator of sexual assault. But it's dangerous for me to have this conversation. It's a litigious minefield because lots of people have tried to nail this person down for their alleged crimes, and this person has very good lawyers. So that's why people haven't gone in before.
Yes.
Because he sues you.
Yes.
And Britain's defamation laws, on planet Britain, the defamation laws are very different to American defamation laws.
Oh, you better believe it.
It's a lot easier to nail someone with defamation in Britain, on planet Britain.
Yes.
And it's the same reason that the British publications, like Dispatches, spent 4 years on these allegations.
Yes.
4 years being before Russell Brand was the voice of the people.
Yes.
Okay, so the reason these people didn't go to the police, by the way, why didn't they go to the police? Either then or now. Maybe going to the police with rape allegations isn't an easy thing to do.
No.
Maybe especially when you're going up against someone who's very famous.
Yes.
And known for suing people.
That's right. Can you really imagine going down to Sunhill Nick with that? No.
Yeah. Maybe it's a horrible experience getting sampled, handling over your underwear, letting them go through your phone, investigating your life. Maybe that's a very unpleasant experience. Maybe you've already been violated once, and the last thing you want is to go through that all again. It's never happened to me, but I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
Just because, I know I'm not a woman, but I'm logical. That's and also the investigation took 4 years, like I said.
Yes.
Before they started COVID, before Russell was Mr. COVID, right?
Yep.
And also they started this 4 years ago, this investigation, when the Me Too movement was still in full swing.
Yes.
When they were taking down Spaceys and Weinsteins and Matt Lauers and Charlie Roses, and Russell Brand fits right in.
Yes.
There's nothing partisan about it.
Yeah.
He was just one more celebrity they tried to take, but it took 4 years,
yes.
right? So there's nothing suspicious about the timing of the allegation whatsoever, unless you're a hack.
Which is a big unless.
Yes, that's right. Actually, one more thing. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
On this, I'm not saying the allegations have nothing. I'm not saying that the desire to get Russell Brand has nothing to do with his videos.
Yeah.
Because maybe it does have something to do with videos, and that is he's in your face.
Yes.
When he makes videos, and if you're someone who's had experiences with him.
Yes. Yeah.
And you see his videos all the time, it reminds you of the experiences you've had with him.
Yes.
And it might piss you off.
Yes.
Anyway, so there's that. What you just heard, guys, was the Biden, Missouri section. I hope it was worth the wait. We are so over time now. We didn't even get to Malay.
I think we've just got to talk about Malay very briefly.
Okay, you talk about Malay.
Okay, so this actually goes back to something that we were talking about earlier, which is a tendency to lump all right-wing figures in with each other.
Yeah.
So there was a lot in the American media about Milei, who has just been elected president in Argentina, about, this is the make Argentina great again moment. This is Argentina's Trump. Look at him. He's a right-wing outsider, blah, blah, blah. No. Okay. Milei is not Argentina's Trump.
Definitely not.
Yes, he is a right-wing outsider, definitely. But he is an anarcho-capitalist, okay? He's a member of Argentina's Libertarian Party. Is this the first time any libertarian has ever actually been elected to anything?
Reason Magazine is so excited.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at what he, actually believes in, some of this is very different from what you would expect from Trumpian kind of populism.
Yeah.
Okay, because, there are multiple competing strands of populism. He's actually going against the dominant strand of Argentine populism, which is Peronism.
Yeah.
His favorite ever figure in recent Argentine political history is a finance minister who's extremely unpopular because of the fact that he implemented IMF structural adjustment packages in the 90s. Which led to unemployment and ultimately riots. This is, in terms of his actual beliefs, like he calls himself an Austrian economist. Like he's basically a marginal revolution comment section who's become the president of quite a large country. Now,
that's a very accessible reference.
Yes. Now, yes.
Let's just say he's a Tea Partier. That's a better reference.
Yeah. Like, okay, so yes, right wing, yes, outsider, but like with a very clear and strong ideology, which is very different from something that you would expect from Trump. Now, just to make a counter argument to this, okay, so in 2012, Corey Robin wrote this book, The Reactionary Mind, which I've talked about before. I'm pretty sure that that's in the reading list, where he made this argument, which I do continue to find very interesting and quite powerful. He actually makes an argument, look, ultimately, everything on the right, from the libertarians to the fascists, is driven by one idea. That is that there is a natural order that has been disrupted and that the disruptions to the natural order brought about by liberals and the left have elevated the losers and have downgraded the natural winners. And everything is about restoring the natural winners. So the libertarian version of this is, life is fundamentally about economic competition, and government intervention in that just, elevates and reproduces the weak. The conservative version of this is that there is a natural order to society, and there's been this attempt to level it by the left. The fascist version, of this is a sort of Herbert Spencerian kind of, power belongs to the strongest. Rule belongs to the strongest, and there's been this massive interference in the natural order that goes all the way back to ancient Judaism and Christianity. So that's his argument. And I think it is actually a very compelling argument, but that doesn't actually tell you anything about the different kinds of systems, the different kinds of policy implications of different right-wing beliefs. And the fact is, it is actually, these systems do actually look very, very different. I mean, we're going to see what libertarianism in practice looks like to the extent that Milei, can...
We're not going to see anything because he's only got 7 seats in the parliament. So he's not going to be able to do anything.
Can put it in. But like you can see all of these as utopian schemes that are actually, they're actually offering quite different utopias up. And they've actually got quite different, there's certain overlaps between policy prescriptions, but there's a lot of differences as well. So as much as I like Corey Robin's argument, I think it's very elegant and parsimonious. That is no reason to call Milei the Trump of Argentina.
Absolutely. By the way, just to correct myself, it's 7 in the Senate, 7 out of 72 in the Senate, 35 out of 257 in the House.
Yes.
But all I'd say is, that's fair enough. Definitely not Trumpist. He wants to, he's all about scaling down the size of government. That's definitely not Trump for anyone who's been paying attention. And let me just read you one quote. He has said that as long as the state doesn't have to pay for it, he could support drug legalization, open immigration, sex work, transgender rights, same-sex marriage, and selling organs.
Yes.
That's not very Trump.
Yeah. Although he's against abortion, though.
Yeah,
against abortion and against euthanasia. Euthanasia.
Yeah.
Which is, there's also something very marginal revolution about that like you've got this ultra consistent ideological system, but with weird, unexplained exceptions.
Well, to be fair, if you're pro selling organs, you're kind of pro euthanasia, aren't you? Like the two go hand in hand, don't they?
It depends on
how many you sell, I guess.
Depends on whose organs you're selling.
If you could sell an organ, if you were allowed to sell an organ, what organ would you sell? This is a bit of an insight into Dave's mind here.
I'm going to need some time first of all, I'm going to need some time to think about this and to do some research on what organs can you... My appendix. I'll donate my appendix. Yeah. Who wants my appendix?
Yeah, my spleen is for sale if you want it. Bye-bye, spleen. Actually, I'll tell you a real organ I would sell.
Yeah.
I'll just, because I'm just thinking about this too now. Not the whole organ, just a bit of it.
Yeah.
I'd sell a bit of my liver. If you want some of my liver, because I don't drink. What a waste of a liver. I could make some cash. Some hard Argentinian
People
pesos.
who don't drink still need livers, Jess.
What do you use your liver for if you don't drink?
It processes all the waste in your body.
I got no waste.
No waste, 100% efficiency.
Everything I take in is just gold.
Okay.
Okay, I won't sell my liver. But my spleen is still for sale. Okay, we've done enough.
Okay, yeah.
So there's heaps. Oh, yeah. Oh, I can't believe it. Yeah, and this is him playing with a chainsaw. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
You can't talk about him without playing the chainsaw clip.
Now,
he's crazy, I should say. Even though he's not Trump, he's definitely crazy.
Yes.
And I admire his hair.
Yes. Yeah. So we'll leave the epic Michigan football corner until actually next week, because the Michigan-Ohio State game is in 2 days.
That works great.
So we'll leave it until after that.
That works great. And something tells me that Israel isn't going to be solved by next week either.
Probably not. And
So,
we've been going now for like nearly 2.5 hours.
2:20, I'd say.
So once again, I'm very grateful to the Pepper who showed me how the toilet door worked before we began.
Thank you so much, folks. We will see you next week. Stay peppy.
Stay peppy.